Everyone, we're on page 27b.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning. Good morning. Page 27b of Gemara Brochos. What, Susan?
I said, good morning, Rebbe Smith.
Good morning. Good morning. So the Gemara that we learned before spoke about reciting Kiddush before it's dark, before it's night. It's after Plag HaMincha, so it's after the time that a person could accept Shabbos, but are you allowed to have your meal at that time? In other words, you can accept Shabbos early. Are you allowed to make Kiddush at that time? So the Gemara questioned that. The Gemara said that, yes, you could make Kiddush. Not only that, you can even make Havdalah on Shabbos day early. And although it seems a little surprising to us, and David had a good question about that it doesn't seem like it fits with the bracha, and I don't have an answer yet. It's something that I'm still trying to think about. And the truth is, the Gemara Brochos later does talk about the bracha of Havdalah. So we might have to wait a few months till we get up to the Gemara about the Havdalah, and then maybe we'll understand how it's possible to recite Havdalah even when it's still Shabbos. On a simple level, I guess the answer is that it's connected to the davening. And just like you could daven early, you could recite Havdalah early. But that's not... that answer is more what you call balabatish. Doesn't really satisfy the full, it doesn't seem to fully satisfy at least myself and maybe you as well. Yes, David.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that all the blessings that we ask for in Shemon Esrei that we don't ask for on Shabbos, because we're not supposed to ask for those things on Shabbos. The person who's davening Marv early while it's still Shabbos is violating that.
Interesting. Well, the thing is, the reason why I'm thinking about that is because earlier Taisvis mentioned that really on Shabbos you're really meant to say all those brachas. And let me read it inside here. Taisvis earlier on page 26b, he said that even on Shabbos, the din is you should daven all 18 brachas. Just they didn't force you, they didn't obligate you because it's such a bother. But what it sounds like is that the requesting of those brachas is not really against Shabbos. It's just they didn't obligate you to recite them on Shabbos. Now, that's one statement. Now, there is another place where it says, why is Havdalah in the first bracha? And the reason is because that you're going to be requesting all of those, the reason you're going to be requesting all of those things. So what it sounds like is that you're not really supposed to request all, in other words, we want to first remove Shabbos before you request all the other requests. So I have to look that up, exactly what the wording is, why, but there is such a concept of reciting Havdalah before we put in those requests. And that would touch upon what you're saying. In other words, it's based on these two ideas. On the one hand, is it that you don't request the intermediate blessings of the Shemona Esrei? Does it have to do with the problem? Does it interfere with Shabbos? Or is it just you're not obligated to recite them on Shabbos? So I think that would be it may be a understanding of how you could do it, because if it's, in other words, if it's only not obligated to recite those on Shabbos, but you're allowed to, so they're not a contradiction to Shabbos. On the other hand, it does seem if it's the reason why Havdalah is in the bracha about the Chaynim, that would imply that it's maybe you're not supposed to say those brachas, and so I guess it would have to look up these two sources. There is an interesting discussion about a person who is not going to be fasting on Tisha B'Av. and the Tisha B'Av fell Saturday night. So I think it was, I'm not sure, but I think it was Rabbi Soloveitchik came up with this idea that if the person is not allowed to fast, let's say he's not well or something, so he's not going to be fasting on Tisha B'Av, but he doesn't want to drink, of course, the Havdalah wine, after Shabbos, because you can't drink the wine, and you can't drink wine during the 9 days and so on. So he came up with this idea, well, if he makes Havdalah on Shabbos, so then he's not transgressing. He can make Havdalah on the Shabbos itself early. If he's making Havdalah early on Shabbos, no problem drinking the wine. And then he's going to be able to have Havdalah and not have to fast. In other words, he's in a scenario where he's not well and he's not going to fast on Tisha B'Av, but he's able to hear Havdalah because he'll make it on the Shabbos. And so I don't know, they came up with some way of getting around. I'm not exactly sure the scenario, because it sounds a little surprising to me. If you only have wine, you could make it during the 9 days. If you don't have anything else, you can drink the wine. If there's no one else to drink the wine, you can do it. So I don't know why the scenario was that he wasn't able to, but somehow he came up with a scenario where he was going to be able. Oh, I know. Another scenario was a person is an avel. Let's say a person's relative passed away, and they weren't buried yet. So that's another scenario where person would not be allowed to make Havdalah. But if they want to make Havdalah, they could do it on Shabbos. On Shabbos, you don't do any type of avelus, any type of mourning publicly. So in this scenario, they're not going to be able to make Havdalah after Shabbos because the burial is not going to be, let's say, for another day or something. So there's a thought that maybe if they make Havdalah on Shabbos, then they're able to fulfill the Havdalah obligation. It's just like a little loophole, so to speak. But I don't know if it's not the accepted view. It's just an interesting outcome of this Gemara that we're learning that there is a possibility in a rare case to make Havdalah on Shabbos itself. So that's what we were talking about yesterday. And we also spoke about the obligation of davening Ma'ariv, if it's an obligation or if it's reshus. And I mentioned to you the two views. It's either completely permissible, you don't have to daven Ma'ariv, but the Jewish people accepted it on themselves as a full-fledged obligation. Or the other way of learning, the Tosfos' way, is that it's an obligation that gets pushed aside if there are other reasons, other mitzvahs that you need to fulfill, so you can push aside Ma'ariv. That's the logic of, that's the understanding of the view that Tfilas Arvis Ma'ariv is considered reshus. It's permissible to you don't have to daven it. You're allowed to daven it, but you don't have to. I should mention that the source, what is the reason? Why would Ma'ariv be only reshus? And the answer is because if you think of Ma'ariv as in place of the sacrifices, Ma'ariv was in place of the fats and the limbs that were burned on the altar. Now, what happened if a person didn't burn them on the altar? Did they fulfill the obligation of bringing a sacrifice? And the answer is yes, they still fulfilled the obligation. So you see that the fats and the limbs are not as important, so to speak, because you fulfill the obligation of the sacrifice, even if they're not burned on the altar. So what comes out from that is, in other words, the sprinkling of the blood is very important, the slaughtering and all that. But the burning of the fats is a mitzvah, but it's not an obligation. It's part of the laws of the sacrifice. You're supposed to burn it, but because it's not an obligation, therefore there's an understanding that maybe Ma'ariv would fall into a similar category, that you're not fully obligated to pray Ma'ariv. So these are the two views, if it's an obligation or it's not an obligation. And the argument was between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua. Now you have to understand who we're dealing with, because that's part of the next story of the Gemara. Is an interesting story. It's a story of Rabbi Gamliel of Yavne. Rabbi Gamliel of Yavne is connected to the destruction it's really right after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. When the Beis Hamikdash was being destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was given 3 requests that would be fulfilled. And the Talmud says, if you were given 3 requests from the Romans, why didn't you just ask them not to destroy the Beis Hamikdash? But he didn't ask them that. He asked them for 3 other things. And the Gemara says the reason he didn't ask them not to destroy the Beis Hamikdash and not to exile the Jewish people was because tafasta meruba like tafasta. If you ask for too much, you don't get anything. And so he wasn't going to ask them to let go of the Beis Hamikdash, but he did ask them that they should let Yavne live. They should let Yavne, the yeshiva of Yavne, survive. And Yavne and its wise people, he shouldn't destroy that. And sure enough, Yavne was the Sanhedrin went and moved to Yavne. Yavne became the place for the studies, and all the rabbis, the great rabbis, went to study in Yavne. And that's where Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi. It's called the Rabbi Gamliel of Yavne. You have to understand there's a few Rabbi Gamliels, all related. The grandfather, the the grandson. So this is Rabbi Gamliel of Yavne. His grandfather was called Rabbi Gamliel Hazakin, the old Rabbi Gamliel. But this is Rabbi Gamliel of Yavne, and he was the Nasi, the leader. And when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai passed away, Rabbi Yeshua became the Av Bezdin. So here we have Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. Now, since the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the Jewish people were splintered. And Rabbi Gamliel had a very challenging time, on the one hand, dealing with halacha, what is the law, and at the same time, he was dealing with a splintered Jewish people. Many people were murdered and exiled, sold into slavery. So he's dealing with the Jewish people, and the fact that the Jewish people were not really able to handle, at least in his mind, they were not able to handle different views. In other words, Rabbi Gamliel felt that his view has to be accepted, because if not, the Jews are sort of halfway out the door already. They're already on their, they're not comfortable. They're in exile now. They're already angry. So Rabbi Gamliel felt that his view no one should disagree with him, that they should accept his view as the final halacha to make it more absolute, and we shouldn't add to the already splintered Jewish people. So that was Rabbi Gamliel. Now, he didn't do this for his own honor, but although it looked like he didn't want anyone to disagree with him, but his goal was that there should be a straightforward halacha. And so because of that, we'll be able now to understand this story. Tano Rabbanan, we're maybe 15 lines up from the bottom of the page. Tano Rabbanan, the rabbis learned. Maisa, there's a story. The Talmud Echad, one student, who we'll soon find out, was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It doesn't tell us now, it tells us later. But there was one student, Shabalaf Ne Rabbi Yeshua, he came before Rabbi Yeshua. Amar Lei, and he said to him, Tfilas Arvis Rishus Chayva. He asked him a question, is Ma'ariv a permissible thing? You're allowed to daven Ma'ariv, or is it an obligation? You're obligated to daven Ma'ariv. So what did Rabbi Yeshua say? Amar Lei Tfilas Arvis Rishus. Amar Lei Rishus. Rabbi Yeshua said it's Rishus. It's permissible. You don't have to daven Ma'ariv. Ba'alaf Ne Rabban Gamliel. And then this same student went to Rabbi Gamliel. This is Rabbi Gamliel of Yavne. Amar late tfilas arvis rishus chayva. Is it an obligation to daven ma'ariv or not? Amar le Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel said chayva. It's an obligation. So this student said, "What do you mean?" Amar. So this student said to Rabbi Gamliel, he said, "You're telling me it's an obligation? Rabbi Yeshua told me it's for rishus." So the first question you got to ask is, are you allowed to ask two rabbis the same question? Once you ask one rabbi, you're really supposed to follow that rabbi. And here, this student, he went and asked one rabbi, Rabbi Yeshua, then he went and asked another rabbi. So this is discussed in the commentaries about, and it's brought down generally, you're not allowed to ask two rabbis the same question. In other words, unless you tell the other rabbi first that you already got an answer from one, but you're really not supposed to go and to a second rabbi. Now,
No, I want to run by conversation.
is someone asking a question? I can't hear. Okay, I'm going to mute everyone. The Gemara continues, and this student said, "Amar lei v'haloi Rabbi Yeshua Amar li rishus." Rabbi Yeshua told me it's permissible. You're telling me I'm obligated? Amar lei, he said. Rabbi Gamliel said to him, "Hamtain, wait. Ad sheyichnasu balei trisin, until the shield holders enter the base medrash, the base hamedrash. Wait till the rabbis enter the base medrash. They're called the shield holders." Rashi over here says because they argue in halacha. Other places Rashi says they defend their view, or there's another shot that they sort of save the world from they save the world. They're defenders of the world. They protect the world. Torah protects the world, so they're called the shield bearers. So the Gemara continues, and it says, wait until they arrive. So when the rabbis entered the base medrash, the study hall, so the person who asked the question asked, is it an obligation? Is it permissible or is it an obligation? Amar Rabbi Gamliel said, it's an obligation. Amar lahem Rabbi Gamliel lechachamim. So Rabbi Gamliel said to the rabbis, is there anyone that argues? Is there anyone that argues? Amar lei Rabbi Yeshua laughed. So Rabbi Yeshua said, no, everyone agrees with you, Rabbi. It seems like Rabbi Yeshua sort of realized that Rabbi Gamliel doesn't want anyone to argue, or he was changing his view now. Possibly there's different ways of understanding this Gemara, but he's either changing his view or he understands that Rabbi Gamliel wants to finalize this, that it's a chayva. So Rabbi Yeshua says, no one argues on you. Amar lei v'halei mishimcha. So Rabbi Gamliel said, really? You don't argue on me? I heard in your name that you argue. Mishimcha amruli. They said in your name. Rishus, that you. Amar le Yeshua. Amoid awaglecha. So he said, Yeshua, Rabbi Yeshua, stand on your feet. V'ya'idu b'cha, and let them testify against you. So ad v'ya'idu b'cha. Amad Rabbi Yeshua stood al raglav on his feet, and he said, El mole ani chai v'hu meis. If I was alive and you weren't here anymore, so I could argue with you. I could say you're wrong. It's not true. I could deny it. Since I'm alive and you're alive, how could I deny what you're saying? I can't argue. It's true. I did claim it was Rishus. So this is the statement of Rabbi Yeshua. A little surprising, the wording that he uses. why did he make this whole statement of I could deny it. It is a little surprising. I'm not really sure why he used these words, but basically, Rabbi Yeshua had said Rishus, that Ma'ariv is not an obligation. Rabbi Gamliel says it is an obligation. Rabbi Gamliel is upset that Rabbi Yeshua would argue with him and felt differently, and Rabbi Yeshua is either wants to retract, but he can't because Rabbi Gamliel is saying, "I know you hold this way," and or Rabbi Yeshua is maybe not retracting; he just doesn't want to say it out loud. Yes, Ben.
I wanted to say, maybe we can understand it that he's talking about the student being alive or dead. Then he could argue. Then he could.
Okay, either way, it's a little surprising why he would say this word. Like, just, like what
It's
obviously,
kind of admitting, he's admitting that he might have said it, but if the student was dead, he could deny it.
but number one is he's not going to lie. This is a great rabbi. So why would he say I would deny it? It just seems a little surprising, the whole terminology. I'm not sure I understand what I'm not sure what the reason is,
Rabbi,
why he said such a term.
Rabbi, doesn't achish mean to contradict?
Yeah.
So maybe he could provide sources that basically would support his point of view. So it's not like he's I think that's what it means when I say l'achrish.
I'm not sure what you mean. So you're saying that he wants to say the reason behind his law?
There's a reason behind the way he.
So let him give it. In other words, what is he saying? I can't bring. I'm not sure what you mean to add. But let him bring his reason.
Maybe he didn't want to do it in front of the student, as was said before.
So you want to say that maybe he felt it was disrespectful to prove his point to Rabbi Gamliel. So therefore he said these words. How could
I have another problem.
Argue? I don't know.
Why would they allow the student to say what he said?
What do you mean?
I mean, if these people are whatever it is, so the Rabban Gamliel should either bring in this is what was brought before me, and what's the opinion? Why would the student, who basically has no standing in this group, ask the question?
Well, I guess that was the custom that the students would have questions and they would ask. And Rabbi Gamliel said, "Go, now it's time to ask the questions because everyone's here." So he said, "Let's do it. Let's do it right. You ask the question and let's discuss it." I mean, I don't know if it makes a difference who asked the question, but I guess that was the tradition. He said, "Why don't you wait a moment and you'll ask it when the rabbis are here?" He's giving him the respect of letting him ask his question. That's my understanding. Okay, Robert.
I guess in reading through the last few passages,
Yeah.
I'm in a quandary. Essentially, we have scholars, leaders arguing over, again, the process of the appropriateness of when to pray and what to pray. And so by the end, you have warring camps against each other, which then becomes, so that's it. So I assume that is either healthy because we allow for this kind of discourse and for people to understand what different people's opinions are, but relative if they stop at a stalemate. So what am I to make of all of this as being healthy, or I have to make it in my own mind, a distinction between whom I want to follow through this discourse? Does that make sense?
So in other words, you're a little surprised about this whole discussion here because the whole Talmud is all about rabbis arguing, and how over here is it seem like they can't handle someone else arguing.
Well, I guess that's part. This becomes to me sort of very
Right.
explosive relative to other discourses,
Yes.
which are, so I just,
It's a very surprising story, and I'm going to try to continue because it's an interesting story and it's unique, a very unique story here, and it's
Right.
rare. This is not the norm. You're right. This is really not the norm. Does anyone have just a short question, David? Okay.
Yeah, in the Steinsaltz, he says that when Rabbi Yeshua says no one disagrees. He quotes from the Tzion Lenefesh Chaya, which says, in deference to the Nasi, he did not wish to argue with him publicly.
Right. So that's one way. Another way is another understand that I think I mentioned that he didn't want to make a big deal. He was just wanted to be quiet. But the other way, there is another explanation that it's that he was sort of retracting or wanted to retract. There is a third explanation that he was only telling Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who asked the question, that it's rishus for him, for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and he really was not saying that everyone they don't have to daven Ma'ariv. He was saying for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who studies Torah all day, he doesn't have to daven Ma'ariv and interrupt with Ma'ariv because according to in his level, his Torah learning overrides praying. So that's a third way of learning. But anyway, yeah, it's very good. Okay, thank you for mentioning that. Susan, is Susan here? Susan,
I just want to say also, it doesn't say that he's admitting to Rabban Gamliel that he's right. He's just admitting to Rabban Gamliel that I have no choice. I have to admit that I said it. He's admitting to saying it, not admitting to the correctness of the ruling.
Right. Okay. Good point. That was my understanding, that he's saying I can't argue. I did say that. Right. Okay. Susan, did you have a question?
Something I think is more important is that they don't want to work the two sides against each other. That you don't want to ask your father something and then ask your. In other words, that's not right to ask your father something and not tell your mother you already asked the father.
Right. Right. Well, I mentioned that about asking two rabbis. Right.
More important point of this section, maybe.
Good point. Good point. Okay. Yes. Good point. Ezra.
So maybe he didn't want to argue it because he didn't want to be labeled a Zakin Mamre.
Right. Well, a Zakin Mamre, to really be considered a Zakin Mamre, would be after the rabbis conclude one way.
Yeah.
Then it would, then you would start dealing with that. But it wasn't the final conclusion. It was sort of like Rabbi Gamliel deciding the way what he wanted. So it didn't really fall into that category at this point. But it's an interesting thought. Anyway, let me read a little further. I know my time is up, but I just want to finish the page if it's possible. So the Gemara continues and it says, Rabbi Gamliel continued darshaning and giving his lecture. In the meantime, Rabbi Yeshua is standing. Rabbi Yeshua Aymed Araglov ad Sharinu Kol until the whole group of people that were there, they were watching. They said, "What a chutzpah! What a you keep him standing the whole time. It's one thing to you had your fallout. You give him his little punishment, make him stand for 2 minutes. This was over an hour. Who knows how long it was?" When they told the Torgaman, they told the person's name was Chutzpis, the Torgaman. He was the interpreter, but an interpreter in those days, it meant that he would announce, he would stand there and scream out he was like the microphone. He would say it out loud, the speech. So they told him, stop, Amoid, stop. Ba'amad, and he stopped. In this way, they said, Omri, and they said, I'd come in Tzare ben Hazel. How long are we going to cause Rabbi Yeshua to be in pain? Rosh Hashanah Shtakat CRA. Last year, Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Gamliel forced Rabbi Yeshua to go follow his view, which was to come on Yom Kippur. They had an argument what day Yom Kippur was. And he forced Rabbi Yeshua. He said, Rabbi Yeshua, you must come to me on this and this day with your money belt and your stick. In other words, you have to transgress your day of Yom Kippur, because my day of Yom Kippur is the final decision. And he had the same story with Reb Tzadok, where there was a bachar, a firstborn animal that had a blemish, and because Rabbi Tzadok was a kohen, and the blemish happened when the animal was with Reb Tzadok. So the law was that normally we don't trust the kohen, and we're nervous that he might have caused the blemish on purpose for a bachar. This way he'll be able to benefit from a firstborn animal, otherwise, and eat it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be allowed to eat the firstborn animal after the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. So there was a story of Reb Tzadok. He had this firstborn animal, and Rabbi Yeshua permitted it. He said it has a blemish, it's permitted. Rabbi Gamliel said no. He's a kohen. We can't accept it. It's a blanket rule. Any kohen, if the blemish happens while it's by the kohen, we can't be sure that the kohen didn't do it on purpose. So he didn't want to permit that blemish, Rabbi Gamliel. So he forced Rabbi Yeshua to stay standing. So the same type of story. So Hachanami Tiare, and here also he's bothering Rabbi Yeshua. Tov and Abre, let's get rid of Rabbi Gamliel as Nasi. So the rabbis are deciding to depose of their great Nasi, their great leader. Man Noikim Leit, but they said, who are we going to put in his place? Noikmela Rabbi Yeshua. Are we going to put Rabbi Yeshua there? Bal Maisahu. He's part of the story because he's the one who's arguing. It's going to be very painful to Rabbi Gamliel if Rabbi Yeshua takes over. It's like we're making Rabbi Yeshua win over Rabbi Gamliel. Or that's one way of explaining it. Another way of explaining it is it looks like Rabbi Yeshua was arguing in order to win the office. And maybe that's why he was fighting. So we can't take Rabbi Yeshua. He's Baal Mais. He's part of this story. We can't take him. Noikmela Rabbi Akiva. If we put Rabbi Akiva in place of Rabbi Gamliel, Dilma Anishle, maybe he's going to get punished for embarrassing Rabbi Gamliel. He's going to get punished. Why would he get punished? The less he doesn't have merit of his lineage, of his parents. Why not? Because he comes from Gerim, so he comes from non-Jews, so he doesn't have merit. So we need someone who has merit, that if Rabbi Gamliel is angry, it's not going to cause a punishment to happen to the rabbi. Let's put Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who chacham, who ashir. He's wise, he's rich. Who asiri leEzra. He's a 10th generation to Ezra, and therefore he has chosavai, he has merit. So even if Rabbi Gamliel is angry, it's not going to have a negative effect on Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Hu chacham, he's wise. He'll be able to answer any question. He fits the bill. He's rich. If he has to go and serve in the Roman government, he knows how to. He's wealthy enough that they'll respect him. If a person was poor, they wouldn't be able to have the same. They wouldn't have the respect. And because he's wealthy, they'll have respect for him. Well, Siri leEzra, this like he's a 10th one to Ezra. He has the merit. And they're not going to punish him if Rabbi Gamliel sort of davens for this person to get hurt. They're not going to. Also, so they went to him, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. They said, "Would you like to be the person in charge, the Nasi, the Reish Masifta?" So Amar Lahu Ezel v'imlach ben Beisi. Let me go ask my household. Azal v'imlach ben Devisu. So he asked his wife, "Do you want me to be in charge of the yeshiva?" Amralei. We'll turn the page. Amralei Dilma Ma'abrinlach. Maybe they're going to get rid of you the same way they hire you. They're going to take you for someone else. Just like they got rid of Rabbi Gamliel, they got rid of you. Amar La, so he said to her, it's better a person should use a vessel that's expensive, ulamachar litbar, even though tomorrow it's going to get broken. At least he got to use it one day. So let me be I could take this position for one day. So that's Amra Le, she said, Les lachivarta, you don't have white here. Hahu Yaima Bartmanya Sari Shani Hava, that day he was 18 years old. Israchish Lanisa, and a miracle happened. Bahadru Lake Manisari Tare Chivarta. He got 18 rows of white hair. And that's what it means. Hainu de Kamer Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah. That's what Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah says. I am like I'm 70 years old in the Haggadah. Harayani Keven Shivim Shanav. Like Ben Shimon, he wasn't 70 years old, but he's like 70 years old because he got a miracle happened that he got white hair. So this way he had white hair, and therefore they felt that if he has white hair, he respected appropriately. So he was only 18 years old, but he got white hair, and that was the miracle that happened. So that's that's part of the story. There's much more, but we're going to stop here. I'm sorry for taking up more of your time, but I just wanted to. I'm hoping to conclude this chapter for Yom Kippur. So I want to
If we go to the same house, I would think about it and say, oh,
Robert. Yes, Robert.
Just a quick question. We're approaching there's a lot of back noise coming in. We're finishing up book 1. I expect that we'll be going to book 2 of Brochos, so we should start that ordering process because they're not that plentiful to be able to have as a reference. I just want to make sure. Yeah. So book 2. Okay, good.
Yeah, I would suggest ordering book 2. The thing is that we're going to stop for Sukkot.
Oh, sure.
So
I understand.
2.5, 3 weeks there
right.
that to order. But yeah,
right, but I want to anticipate.
That's my goal. Yes, my goal is to.
That's great. That's wonderful. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Great discussion. I really appreciate what we're going through.
Okay, good.
And everybody's contribution.
Thank you. Yes, Ezra. Oh, yeah, I thought you had a question. Okay, I'm sorry. Someone had a question, but I guess I don't see him. Okay. Anyone question? Okay. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll see you on Sunday.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Why do they think they finishing the book? My book just keeps on going.